Welcome to Alan Skorski Reports. I'm Alan Skorski. Last week, it was reported that in Canada, Dr. Emmanuel Moss, chief of cardiac surgery at Montreal's Jewish General Hospital, is leaving Montreal for the United States. He cited rising anti-Semitism in the city as a major factor in his decision. But the crisis of anti-Semitism in healthcare didn't start last week or on October 7th. Back in 2012, a medical student named Lara Kolob publicly stated her intent to inject dangerous drugs into Jewish patients. Last year in Australia, two Muslim nurses boasted about already having killed and their ability to kill Jewish and Israeli patients during a recorded social media interview with Max Pfeiffer. And since October 7th, the rise of Islamist jihadists supporting healthcare workers as a matter of routine have openly talked about how they would harm Jewish and Zionist patients. This past May, today's guest, Dr. Jacob Agronin, an American Jewish cardiologist, told the U.S. Committee on Education and Workforce that his union supports terrorists and excludes Israeli workers from employment. He testified at the subcommittee hearing titled Bad Medicine, Politics, Unions, and the Anti-Semitism in Healthcare. He testified that his union, the Committee of Interns and Residents, publicly supports terrorist sympathizers and formally endorses the exclusion of Israeli colleagues based on national origin. He also said that the union has declared the state of Israel guilty of apartheid and genocide as a matter of official organizational doctrine. Dr. Agronin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, first question, anti-Semitism, and as I mentioned in my monologue about this Layla Kolob from 2012, 4 years ago, I did a show on this because that's when it became public. I think she was at Case Western University, and she got in a lot of trouble. But I told my guest 4 years ago that this was not a one-off, that this is something you're going to see and it's going to grow. She's just the first one dumb enough to get caught. But it's rising more to the point now where they're very comfortable talking about it. So I guess my first question is, how did you get involved in this? What made you decide that you're going to take a stand now? And how did you, I guess, get invited to Congress to expose what's happening in your union?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that was not a one-off. This has definitely become a major issue. Okay, so I really noticed that this was an issue. I noticed this was an issue about 10 years ago, back in college campus, when I saw really the rise and normalization of not just pro-Palestinian, but really anti-Jewish protesters. I thought surely this can't be an issue in healthcare. And about a year ago, when my hospital voted in the Committee of Interns and Residents to represent us as our union, I noticed some pretty problematic things about this union when it comes to this topic. I was pretty disturbed, actually, and we can get more into the details. And I was connected to the American Jewish Medical Association to help me kind of spread the word and see what avenues there were for me to combat this union and what protections did I have. I connected with a fantastic lawyer at the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund, and kind of this has accumulated some interest, including congressional interest, who reached out and wanted a physician to speak on this very important topic, the rise of I think anti-Semitism is too soft to say in healthcare.
Right. See, what's interesting is, you always, at least I used to be naive and think that the one place where you won't find anti-Semitism is in medicine, because medicine is supposed to be made up of people who are good, who go into medicine for altruistic reasons. Yes, you can make a very nice living in medicine, but people go into it because they want to help other people. So besides the anti-Semitism, and I'm going to just something I saw myself, my youngest daughter is an ER nurse in New York. I won't say where. And she told me that last year, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a lot of her colleagues were like almost joking about it. I'm saying, wow, like doctors and nurses say it's a very different breed of people. Um, you mentioned, and you talk about this, in your testimony about all the different bills that they passed, or the different is bill the right word for it?
Their resolutions. Yeah.
Resolutions. Um, I thought about in all the years, because doctors are pretty prevalent in the medical profession. There are a lot of Jewish doctors. I've never ever heard a Jewish doctor say if they ever get a Palestinian patient, what they're going to do to them. And yet you're seeing it everywhere, unafraid. The same people who will punch a cop at a rally will go into, whether it's dentistry, whether it's medicine, whether it's the legal profession, and they'll talk about what they're going to do to the Jews because they feel very, very comfortable in what they've accomplished so far in America.
I think it's an important point that not only do they say these things with total comfort, without any shame. In fact, they say it with great pride
Right.
that as a moral position, that they believe they're taking a moral high ground in excluding, Israelis and Zionists from the workplace, and really from society is their goal.
So, who is this CIR? That's the name of the union, but who is the head of it? Who are they involved with? Are they part of a broader umbrella? Like we saw after October 7th, all the rallies that sprang up. We know that they were organized before. What I'm reading here, what I read from your testimony, this organization didn't just pop up. They were planning this for a while. So, who are they?
Yeah, this is the largest union servicing interns and residents nationally. There's greater than 40,000 members right now. It's actually really the only major union that represents interns and residents, are also called house staff. It's a subsidiary of the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, which is a major labor union that
Right.
represents about 2 million workers total. It's a very well-known union. Um, and it's made up of mostly my colleagues in medicine and residents, and these resolutions are voted on at their annual conventions. It's doctors that are voting on these things.
But someone has to initiate it. I mean, somebody like who has the guts? Like you go to a meeting and sometimes you want to say something, and the person next to you goes, "Shh, don't say that." This had to have been much more organized and much more orchestrated. That this because all of the things about Israel is apartheid, Israel is genocide, blah blah blah. This has been going on college campuses for years, always unanswered. And because I was a pro-Israel activist growing up in college before you were born. Um, I was in Detroit, near Dearborn, Michigan. Okay, it's been going on for over 40 years. And when I see all these things, whether it's at Columbia or CUNY or anywhere in New York, National Apartheid Week, you name it, and there's never been a forceful pushback. I said the day's going to come when they're going to take over and people are going to believe it. So again, it comes down to who these are doctors who have been planning this for a long, long time. And there's got to be a whole bunch of them because it's not 5 or 10 doctors who feel a certain way about Israel or Jews. This has to be a very large, large planned, organization under a big umbrella. And I don't even know if SEIU started it. They're certainly supporting it, but this has to be just an overwhelming number of doctors in that union that got this thing going, that introduced it, that we're going to pass it.
That's certainly the case. I mean, I think this is a multifaceted issue. Keep in mind, every physician, every U.S. physician made their way through a U.S. university, typically.
Right.
And we know that these U.S. universities are breeding grounds for, anti-Jewish indoctrination, um, you know, being promoted and funded internationally by hostile nations. Um, so they're really products of these universities. And, to your point about taking courage, I actually don't think it takes a whole lot of courage for them to bring up these issues at these conventions. I think it's the normal position there, which is really terrifying. Um, this has been a systematic infiltration
Right.
of these really sick, dangerous, anti-American ideologies um, in the field of medicine amongst highly educated, physicians that have taken oaths to care for people
Right.
of, of all walks of life, of all nationalities, um, who suddenly are taking positions that are just fundamentally incompatible with the medical ethics that they signed up for.
Right.
And it is a large portion of the devoted members in this organization that were pushing this. In fact, I know personally um, some former CIR members that are Jewish that were in attendance at that convention, where they voted in the major BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction resolution, who really were just silenced and did not have a platform to discuss this.
Right.
And not only that, but this topic actually dominated the whole weekend and it became the most spoken about topic about divesting from Israel,
Right.
and putting aside all the other, you know, actual labor issues and protections for residents, which is their purported purpose. I think we can all recognize that it's a lot of these organizations are using, kind of they have ulterior motives, and it somehow they all land on Israel.
Question. So you're a cardiologist. The people who are leading CIR, who are they? Where are they? Can you name names where they're working? Because listen, as far as I'm concerned, out them all. There's an organization called Canary Mission, and they out people. And I think these need to be outed. I mean, again, I don't know what you want to do, what your thoughts are on this, but who are these? Who are some of these people, if you can name them?
That's a good question. I mean, I can name one person in particular. The one who signed, the main signatory of the BDS resolution is Dr. Michael Zingman. I can't tell you much about him because I really don't know these people. Unfortunately, I'm not involved
Uh,
in this organization. I actually really don't know many of these
uh,
people personally. I think what's more important is that, more worrisome actually, is that this is your everyday average physician, a lot of
right.
them, that are really in support of this. And, to your point earlier about the Charlie Kirk um, situation, is that a lot of these physicians, do support things that really,
Go against everything
10,
that they
20
would.
years ago, you
Uh,
never would have believed a
right.
physician would say. So, Charlie Kirk, Luigi Mangione are having support for
Right.
all these issues. And it's really kind of scary to see physicians who have devoted many years of their life to
Right.
healing people taking really violent positions.
Right.
And I think the tip of that spear is always Israel and, quote unquote, anti-Zionism.
When you testified before Congress or for the subcommittee, again, I don't know who was there, but um, how were you received, and was there any pushback against some of the things you said?
I think it's an interesting topic because the topic of anti-Semitism in medicine, because, I think at least all the, House members that were in attendance are, publicly, um, and I think, truthfully against anti-Semitism, as, anybody would expect, we would expect to be. Um, it was well received, certainly by the House Republicans who were alarmed by
Right.
this issue and who, called on the hearing and are horrified to
Right.
hear that there's any shred of terror support in healthcare.
Right.
Um, I would say I think the Democrats are also bothered by anti-Semitism, but for them it was more of a secondary issue, and said it agreed it's a problem, but we can't let that overshadow the issue of how unions can benefit these workers. And I think it's dangerous to uh, you know
Yeah.
give any inch here and just let
Right.
these organizations take these positions without consequence because they're doing some good.
Right. Listen, Nick Fuentes does some good also. I mean, every one of these evil forces, Tucker Carlson, I'm sure you can find something good that he espouses
Hmm.
also, but that's dangerous. And here's what's interesting, because if you do a Google on all of Israel medical innovations, Israel is a world leader in so many different fields of medicine. Um, and I jotted down some things here, and I'm gonna mispronouncing them, so I'm afraid to even say them. But that they invented that thing that people who can't walk with paraplegics, they put on like this suit and it helps them walk. They came up with they have all kinds of drugs that detect early cancer. They came up with these pills that can go through your digestive tract. So there is so much that Israel has contributed. I mean, like literally, they're a world leader in medicine. So, did any of that come up at all in the conversation? Because again, it seems to me that the agenda here has got nothing to do with genocide or apartheid. It's about isolating Israel and Jewish doctors.
Yeah, I will say that just a lot of even really standard everyday, not even the fancy products, are Israeli designed. As
Right.
we know, they mean pervasive in our daily lives are a lot of Israeli products you wouldn't even know. So it's always been a disingenuous argument.
Right.
I will say in their actual BDS resolution, they say a whole lot of nonsense. I think the most important line, which I highlighted in my testimony, was therefore be it resolved that CIR joins the international call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel until it complies with international law. We will further support the BDS movement by encouraging their affiliated academic institutions to divest all resources, including but not limited to direct financial contributions, human capital, pension funds, and retirement programs such as 401k and intellectual property. So not only are they focusing on, or really I should say glossing over Israeli tech and innovation,
Right.
as I pointed out, kind of the main problem with this statement is they're talking about human capital. They're talking about encouraging hospitals not to hire Israelis.
Right.
So not only are they, discriminating quote unquote against the products, but they're actually just honest to God discriminating against
Right.
real people based on where they're from. And I think you can draw an easy extension to include American Zionists and Jews.
Right.
Ultimately, is probably what they, deep down hope for.
See, here's a funny thing. When I first stumbled on this years ago, I said, you know what? Maybe anyone who wants to become a doctor, because I know you've got to pass, besides passing your boards, uh, just like becoming a lawyer, you have to also be a person of character and get letters of recommendation. I said, you know what? Maybe it's going to be time. Who's going to say it? I'll say it. Where Muslim doctors have to be vetted. I mean, again, call me what any name you want. I don't care. But if you're going to come from a place where you have a larger agenda than just medicine, then maybe you've got to be just like people are vetted coming to this country. If you're again, Mahmood Khalil is a perfect example. You mentioned in
Mm-hmm,
your testimony that they wanted him to not
mm-hmm.
be deported or freed because Trump wants to deport him. What does medicine have to do with a guy who's a Hamas supporter at Columbia University? So
Yeah,
there is a much bigger agenda here.
absolutely. And our medical union has absolutely nothing to do with Mahmoud Khalil, and they shouldn't comment on it at all. I think even more worrying, another individual that they focus on that I pointed out is Dr. Rasha Alawiya,
Yeah.
a transplant nephrologist at Brown University Hospital um, from Lebanon, uh, flew back home, attended Hassan Nasrallah's funeral, and returned with essentially Hezbollah propaganda on her phone,
Right.
admitted that she and her family have sympathies towards Hezbollah terrorists, and got deported. CIR has mentioned countless times. They've sent emails, they've posted on Instagram, they've corroborated with other groups, including one called Muslim Advocates, um, just in support of her. I mean, I can read you a little excerpt of one of
Sure.
the private emails they've sent to members, but they're saying Dr. Rasha Alawi was unjustly deported after attempting to return home to Rhode Island following a trip to Lebanon. Immigrant doctors like Dr. Alawi play an important role in our healthcare systems. She's an empathetic and respected physician in the eyes of patients and peers. She's a compassionate healthcare provider who's provided our community with critical, high quality care. She stood by her patients, her community, and her colleagues, and it's our turn to stand up for her. Well, she's also stood by Hezbollah terrorists, which CIR loves to neglect.
Right.
And truthfully, they don't care. And actually, it's probably a feature for them. So it's absolutely alarming that there are these people, and this is a fairly, prominent physician in this field, who are honest to God terror sympathizers. And
Right.
it's becoming more and more common, and not only common, but more acceptable for them to say. We should be screening. I don't care, what religion you are, our foreign doctors,
Right.
and anybody with these kinds of ideologies
Right.
are dangers to America and have absolutely no role in the hospital.
Let me ask you something. I read also that there are about 250,000 Jewish doctors in America. That's why I read an article around this story. How many of them are Jews like you or Jews like Bernie Sanders. I don't know. But let's say a significant number of them are Jews who are proud Jews. Have you thought about, or is there even a possibility of maybe reorganizing a Jewish, again, I don't know how many you mentioned earlier about Jewish Medical Association.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Maybe it's time to go to war with, because I'm guessing at CIR, I'm sure that they are affiliated or close to CARE, Doctors with, I mean, and other left-wing groups. And maybe it's time to declare war on them and make this a very public fight.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, again, I'll mention again, specifically with the Dr. Alawiya case, I have an Instagram post pulled up right now that they co-sponsored with a group called Muslim Advocates, which there really isn't much information available, but
Yeah,
as with most of these organizations, they do have ties to CARE, and the money usually
right.
tracks back to Qatar. So um, I think it's critical that Jewish physicians come together. I think the American Jewish Medical Association, the AJMA, is doing fantastic work on multiple fronts to combat these issues and taking very strong positions and multifaceted approaches to
Right.
combating the issues of anti-Semitism, discrimination, and kind of more importantly, the larger issue of just these really pro-terrorist ideologies, um, specifically in medicine. But this, again, is an
Right.
issue. This is one tentacle of an issue that's present in all
Right.
institutions in this country now.
Well, just like the left is targeting pro-Israel activists, like you've got this group called APAC Tracker. Two people, one of them is a hard leftist, the other one is a groiper. Okay. You got like a neo-Nazi and a communist, but they've got one common enemy, the Jews. Um, and I think that again, we need to start focusing like SEIU. They support a lot of Democrats. They're a big labor union. We need to find out, who they're endorsing and make it known that you're being supported by a union that supports terrorism because we're getting our
Yeah,
asses kicked because of propaganda and lies, and we've allowed our enemies to define us. I'm 63, and 10 years ago, I never would have believed where we are today. But I tell my kids, I tell everyone, I'm sorry I say this to you, but our future in America is very bleak. And that's the way I look at it. I think we're two or three presidential elections away from being in real trouble.
well, I unfortunately think that exposing who CIR supports politically, because there is a political arm of CIR, it's called COPE,
Right.
and they actually very, like I said, loud and proud support these people. Of course, they supported Mamdani,
Right.
AOC. Now they're supporting, I'm forgetting his name, but you know,
Plantner in Maine.
uh, not him. I'm thinking of the guy in Jersey, I think. But
Oh, Hamawawi or Hamadawi, something like that.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Brad
And
Lander
he's
now.
also a doctor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a great, excellent point.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, this is really, there's no shame.
Right.
And like I'll say it again, they're very proud to take these positions. It's a moral high ground for them. For some reason, it's become this way.
Right.
So exposing them, I just don't think will work because again, this is a feature for them. This
Right.
anti-Zionism becomes a tip of this ethical sphere, um, and this is what people want out of their union, believe it or not. Um, Again, the reason they have so much support is they're again a product of these
Right.
universities where they've been indoctrinated with this ideology, and kind of suicidal empathy towards these groups,
Right.
and they're just letting them walk in the front door, really.
So, okay, so you testified before Congress. What is it that they've told you that they're going to look into? What's the end game here?
Um, one problematic and specific feature, um, as it pertains to CIR is all of their dues, all of our dues that we would pay, are subsidized by Medicare. Our salaries are subsidized by Medicare. So they're receiving essentially 100%
Right.
federal dollars. They're receiving federal dollars to say, blatantly
Mm,
anti-Semitic things, which clearly go against Title VII of the Civil
right.
Rights Act, and
Right.
uh, you know, State Department definitions of anti-Semitism. Not even to mention their open discrimination against people of national origin. So this is
Right.
creating potential real civil rights issues with this group.
Right.
Um, so that's a major thing. So no specific legislation regarding this specific topic was proposed. I believe Randy Fine mentioned some legislation
Okay.
during the hearing.
He's
Um,
unafraid.
he's definitely unafraid.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and my hope is that on a small level that we aren't forced to pay, because in most cases,
Right.
even if you're not a member, you're forced to pay these unions. Um, there need to be real consequences these days for this kind of activity in this country. It can't be tolerated, and we shouldn't have to fund it. And my Israeli colleagues in particular shouldn't have to fund
Right.
an organization that actually hates them.
But see, to me, there are two aspects to this. You're paying for your own, to get beat up, but they shouldn't even be allowed to exist as far as I'm concerned. You cannot have a union, a medical union, no less, where you have an animus, this type of animus towards patients or colleagues, where you can actually pose a threat to them.
Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
how can an Israeli patient feel comfortable knowing that some of their physicians don't
Oh,
even want them in this country? I mean,
yeah.
if you replaced Israeli with any other race of people, there'd be outcries and people would be
Right.
fired and canceled. But when it comes to Israel, again, they are very proud about it, actually. Um, but I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking Hebrew in front of some of my colleagues, and certainly not when they have a position of authority and power over my
Right.
health. That would worry me.
You know what? Do it. Dare them to do something. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but you know, um, because again, they know that we're afraid of them, and they've gotten this comfortable in this country. And again, this is right now, I think the greatest threat. Listen, all the neo-Nazis are a bunch of knuckleheads. They've been around, but you're not saying they're too dumb. They're not smart enough or academic enough to go into medicine, so they make trouble in other areas. But a lot of these, a lot of Islamists, Muslims, these are educated people. They're smart, and they've got a long plan. They're going into law school, they're going into media, they're going into academia, they're going into politics,
Hmm.
because all of this is part of their grand plan, where one day they are going to be running every important institution in this country.
Absolutely, it's part of the program, really. I
Yeah.
mean, it's infiltrating every institution. Medicine is just one of them, and that's the one
Right.
I happen to be involved in. And I
Right.
think one of the more worrying ones, since you actually have positions of power over
Right.
very vulnerable populations. Um, I think it's a really bad omen for a country when they start to adopt widespread and open Jew hatred. It never really goes well, um, and it's really worrying to see. And you know, in my limited life experience, I never could understand how something like the Holocaust could have ever happened. And I'm watching it before my very eyes over
Yeah.
these last 10 years, month after month, year after
Yeah.
year. These people are just coming out of the woodwork and saying it loud and proud out in the open,
Yeah.
under the guise of supposed anti-Zionism, which is just an awful,
Right.
front for a despicable hate movement. Um, and it's very clear to me how you
Right.
mobilize a significant portion of your population to really hate a specific group of people, which usually tends to be the Jews.
Right. So it's funny you say that, because I have so many books in my case, trying to, because I've always wanted to wrap my head around. You can dislike somebody, I get that, but the hatred and how 1930s happened, that this is how it happened. But I think this is even more dangerous, and I've said this in one of my other shows. Hitler was a punk and a loser who built a movement. But here, we're starting with the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people okay, so Germans or the Aryans, they believed in the master race, Germany for Germans. Okay, I get it. Who are these people? These are death to America people. We're not even being chased out by people who love America. We're being chased out by people who hate America,
Mm-hmm.
and America's letting them. That's why, again, I think today, again, it's more dangerous. I know we're going off topic a little bit, but this is just how dangerous it is for Jews today. And again, when it seeps into medicine, I think that's when we're in real super trouble.
Yeah, I think it's very much on topic actually,
Yeah.
because again, like to get into the healthcare space in
Right.
your hospital, terror supporters in your hospital, um, that's an incompatible ideology
Right.
with everything that supports. I understand people, you always have radicals in different facets of life, but when you're in, one of the most highly educated spaces,
Correct.
you can see that this has really reached a critical mass where support of these ideologies is actually almost socially acceptable in a lot of
Right.
circles.
Dr. Agronin, we got another minute or two left. So, last question for you. What is your next step? Like, was this for you something that you want to wrap your head around and lead? Was it something that you just had to get off your chest type of thing? What's your next move?
I never asked for this. I never asked to go to Congress. I never asked to, kind of lead this issue.
Right.
I was really just pissed off and really sick and tired of watching Jews get trampled over, um, and really felt compelled to do something about it.
Right.
I think starting small and realistic is at least just allowing us to, convincing my hospital to not agree to a clause that would force Jews, Israelis, or anybody else who ideologically disagrees with the union to fund it.
Right.
Maybe take that model to other hospitals and, um, you know, also just expose this problem. It's an enormous
Right.
problem.
Okay. Dr. Agronin, it's been an honor meeting you. I wish you continued success in everything you're doing. Let's stay in touch because you've started something that's very, very big, and we need to grab this thing before it gets worse. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Okay.